so that.
Could you just remember to take a record of how many people for our internal record?
Mhm.
Oh, so I am the behind the scenes person. Faith Ann is my RATA. She helps me out with lots of things, and I'm the founder of the group. And so she set this up and everything. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and I'm so glad to see familiar faces and to meet you, Ann. And I just want to say in advance, best wishes and good energies and everything for your upcoming defense. Go ahead, Faith.
Uh, Really glad to have Dr. Odokara back with us. We had her last year talking about defending the proposal, and Deb, who's on today, was like, "Can she do one on defending their dissertation?" And as you can see from us being here, it is a topic that those of us who are going for a dissertation really want to know about. So I do not have the most up-to-date bio on Dr. Odokar, so I'd love for her to tell us a little bit more about what she's doing now, and can't wait to see what her presentation is. Dr. Odokar?
All right. Well, glad to see everyone. Uh, I actually let me just put up my first slide so you can see that and just check if you can see that.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Um, I'm Carron Odokara, and I am a new resident of Pennsylvania on the western half of the state, just north of Pittsburgh by about an hour. I have just recently become the director of ministers or regional pastor or district superintendent. Different people use different names within the church body. Uh, I'm the director of ministries for 63 churches as a part of the Church of God Anderson faith group. And so I drive around an awful lot and put a lot of miles on my car, but it's exciting to see what God is doing through some of the churches in this area of the country. Uh, I graduated in 2021, and it's starting to now sink in that I am entitled to that title doctor at the front of my name. It's a pretty good thing. So I'm excited for all of you as you go on this journey. Is that good, Faith, or can I get started?
You're welcome to get started.
All right. So this part of the dissertation or the whole dissertation process, the whole PhD process is part of the most exciting part, but also in some ways the most daunting part because I've heard so many stories, both positive and negative, about experiences. But you all are putting in the effort to try to figure out all the things you can do to make it positive, and I'm sure that you will have great success. So for today, uh, you're at the finish line, you're getting close, you're almost there, but let's talk about some things that'll help you get past it. We're going to talk about moving through the stages, understanding the defense, preparing for the defense, completing post-defense work, just as a reminder for people, because a lot of times we think we're done when we walk out of the defense, and getting to the finish line and questions and discussion. If you have questions or discussion, feel free to interject as we go. There may be times where if your question is something I'm going to address later, I may push it off, just to keep with the flow of things. But I welcome the discussion as we go, and I'm not going to watch your faces. So either you're going to have to chat, and Faith Ann is going to have to watch for it, or you're just going to have to come off mute and just kind of interject that way. All right, well, let's get started. I put together this flow last time. If you all remember that were here before, there's certain pieces of it that I actually leveraged from what I did before, and then just updated it on how it's different from the proposal defense. But then there's other things that are in here that are totally new perspective because the final defense is distinct, is different from the proposal defense. But the dissertation defense is where we're at, kind of towards the end, almost to the poofy hat. Or if you're like me, I wanted the stripes on the sleeve rather than the hat. But, anyways, you're almost there. Couple things that I always encourage anybody in the PhD process to remember when they get to the point of the research study is the two key rules. One is follow your dissertation handbook. I realize that we have some people that are from other schools. There may be some nuances to this, but directionally, most of this will apply to you. It'll maybe be on some of the technical paperwork things, which I don't deep dive into, but maybe have a couple plugs of reminders in there. But everybody has a dissertation handbook, and your chairs generally like it if you're on top of the process and they're not having to teach you details, because you are, future scholars, future PhD doctors yourself, so they appreciate that. And follow the guidance of your chair. Your chair is your best ally. You may not think about that when you're getting marked up documents back to you that have more red and tracking on them than you could believe is possible, especially when you thought that was your best effort. But they are your ally, both for you in the process, but also for them, because they're putting their name on your work as saying that you have accomplished a level of scholarship, and so they want to make sure that you are best capable of getting to that next stage in terms of your academic progress. In the dissertation defense, there's kind of like three parts of it. This is kind of the kind of, let's say, just basic description kind of things. There's the student presentation, an oral presentation of the research that you have completed. There's the committee examination. That's where the committee is basically assessing whether or not you are meeting the expectations in terms of conducting research, doing the analysis, your findings and implications, and all of that together in your study. And then there's the committee deliberation, where basically they decide if you pass, they approve you, or whether there's further revisions or whatever scenarios. But in terms of practical matters, when we think about that, you've got probably a 20-30 minute presentation, depending on your chair, might tweak that plus or minus, or particular schools may have adjustments to that. But you've got years of work that you have put into this, and you got 20 to 30 minutes to convey that. However, you realize your committee is the only people on the planet that have spent as much time looking at your dissertation as you have. And so they're familiar with it, and it'll be okay. Um, this is the part, if your school allows for open defenses, the student presentation part is really the only part that they allow people into. Everything else tends to be private with you and the committee. So once you do your presentation, if it's closed, then you just flow right into the questions. If it's open, there's a dismissal of anybody that's either in the room or on the Zoom to leave. And then you get into the committee examination, where they're asking you questions about your research study. And some of it will be questions to just kind of expand your mind and maybe even throw you a little bit. But your research, you are the expert on your research study, so you'll be able to handle it. Then there's the committee deliberation. Uh, the committee deliberation is where they excuse you from the room or excuse you from the Zoom session, and then they talk about you and they talk about your research, and they make the final decision before they call you back and with their final answer for you. So kind of leading into that presentation part, you're going to basically be working with your chair primarily, and some involve committee members to different degrees. I know some people have been more involved with like their methods person on their committee, if the chair is maybe more on the content side or otherwise. And so you'll have varying levels of involvement with your committee. My chair was very much a gatekeeper, and so she had to make sure it was really good stuff before she was even going to bother the rest of the committee. But that chair really drives kind of the process, and that chair is like the ultimate first step in determining if the dissertation is in its final form and ready for defense. And I emphasize final form, like everything's got to be together. like the title page, the table of contents, all the APA, everything's got to be together. You've got to be presenting it like it's a book ready to be published, because that's ultimately what your aim is. Once you get your chair's agreement, then you're into the committee review and feedback. They're basically deciding if they agree with the chair and saying, "Yep, we're ready for the defense. This looks like good stuff." Different. I experienced like certain people gave me some questions ahead of time. The chair might want some of that feedback ahead of time to also help assess whether the committee is really thinking things are ready or not. And then you proceed to the presentation part. The student is going to prepare that presentation that I mentioned, around 20, 30 minutes, and then the defense meeting. Now, for me, my chair pretty much made me kind of coordinate and do all the legwork of the emails between people to find a time to do it. But the important thing is you get something scheduled. There may be downtimes. Different schools may have different policies around this. At Eastern, July and December, we weren't allowed to have defenses of any sort, proposal or final dissertation. But you'll have to work around everything from sabbaticals of your committee members to their vacation to work schedules for you, etc. And then at that point, coming out of the meeting, you're hoping to gain the approval of the committee and the department chair, if for the final answer. And also, as you're scheduling the meeting, at least for how we did it, this is the point at which you would also get agreement from the committee, all members of the committee, if it can be an open defense. Some people, want to invite family, friends, and everything to hear the presentation of that final moment, to give them a little taste of what you're in for. I did have an open defense, and it was an interesting opportunity to share some of what I had been working on for years with the people, even though they were kind of objective bystanders. All right, so let's talk about that presentation. You're going to create slides. Just the visuals help people understand and follow you and what you've done. It can be PowerPoint, can be Canva. There's no real guidance around those kind of things, at least not that I was given. Uh, the length of the presentation will depend on your chair. Here's where it starts to get a little more different from what I was expecting going into the final defense versus like the proposal. It really focuses on the core aspects of, let's say, chapter 4 forward. Now, I would probably have to caveat some of chapter 3, because if there's things that happened in your study that kind of makes you go back and kind of rethink some things in terms of your data collection or analysis process, or even if you're adding some additional hypothesis into that as some of the work based on what you were starting to find from the data. There can be some things from chapters 1 to 3 that are included, but really the heavy emphasis will be on 4 and beyond. You're going to basically tell the how, in terms of how the data collection and analysis process actually occurred, especially if there's some differences based on what you encountered as you actually got into the work. But then the bulk of it is going to be focused on the explaining what were your findings from the research. And so depending on, if you're qualitative versus quantitative, there's different things that you're going to highlight, but ultimately you're going to say, what did this research show? That is the bulk of the dissertation. So, the lit review that you spend all eternity on, the lit review that you actually had to go update as a result of maybe some of the things that you were finding or getting some more recent literature, if some people were operating in the space that you were researching, all of that kind of stuff is kind of like bonus material, some of the background knowledge that kind of is part of your foundational knowledge base, but is not really the emphasis of the final presentation for your dissertation defense. One of the things you're going to want to do, or I advise you to do, is talk with other people who have completed a dissertation defense. So part of that you're doing tonight by, gathering together and talking with me. If there's other people, that would be great. Also, as a bonus, if there's other people who have your particular chair, that's always a bonus. So you can kind of get a feel for how they like to operate things. Know your audience. Even if you have an open defense, all those other people in there are irrelevant. The only people you care about are the three people on your committee, because all those other people, I don't care if they're your spouse, your mother, your father, your kids, they cannot grant you a PhD, but your three committee members can. So when I did it, I felt like, oh, I'm not giving all the background information. Who cares? I wanted to walk out with a PhD more than I wanted to, have my family and friends enjoy that. Know your audience, know the three committee members. Make sure, again, you're listening to your chair in terms of the points of emphasis they may suggest to you. Also, if your committee members are giving you some feedback in terms of potential questions they might want to address with you, you can take those into account for your presentation. And there's things where I tweak some things in the presentation itself. There's things where I added like an appendix at the end to be ready for certain questions that I thought might come based on what they had given me up front as some feedback. You want to be ready to respond to the committee's questions. Uh, this can kind of feel intimidating because there's three of them and there's one of you, but you need to remember that you know your research better than anyone. And there may be times where they're asking you questions. And I remember one time where they asked me a question. I'm like, but that was out of scope for my study. I mean, just like interesting question. That could be further research that would be an opportunity, but I can't address that. It would be beyond the data that I have to answer in that particular space of a question. Again, you know your research better than anyone on the planet. And so you need to go in with that level of confidence in what you've done and how many times you've revised it to make sure that you were on track with what you needed to do and the coaching that you've also gotten from your chair along the way. The other thing that's, even though it's kind of intimidating, because you know that this is like the make or break of of getting your final answers to get to graduation, is it's almost like free consulting, because sometimes we pick a topic, or some of the folks in my cohort pick topics because they were doing something in line with what their professor or their chair was interested in doing. I had a topic when I came into the program, and I literally on my application said, if I can't research this, don't admit me. And so I felt so passionate about my topic that it felt like I was getting like this free consulting from experts as they're asking questions, and the exchange you have in the final defense is, if it wasn't for the nervous part of it, the nerve-wracking part of it being like, will I graduate or not, it would actually be kind of fun, because it's like free consulting on your topic. You're starting to interact with your committee at, as almost like a peer, like for like the first time. And so it is kind of fun, but it's so nerve-wracking you almost don't enjoy it as much as you probably could. So that's just some thoughts around the dissertation defense presentation preparation. Some things, just kind of tips for you. Plan for your setting. I heard a day trip to get to a room versus doing it on a Zoom. Different people, different things, whether it's a requirement of the school or whether it's just what is possible for you to do. If you're doing it on a Zoom, you want to make sure that you have everything lined up for how you're going to handle your slides. Like I got the two monitor set up here. I think I actually, when I did my defense, had a three monitor set up to help me out so I could fully see, the folks as well as see my information and manage bouncing around slides if I wanted to. You're going to want to have your setup and test it out ahead of time. If you're in a room, very different setup. You're probably not going to have three monitors, but you are still going to probably manage some kind of PowerPoint or presentation, and you're going to want to get there early and try out the logistics and technology of the room to make sure it's working. As a former corporate IT manager, I don't trust technology at all. So test it, retest it, and then have backup plans and options for what you may do if everything goes wrong. Practice to meet your timing. I I've heard of people basically getting cut off or shut down. So you want to make sure you're pretty close to the time limit, plus or minus, so that you're not like missing half of your presentation when your chair's like, okay, we're tired of listening to you. You need to stop now. And then you haven't done what you needed to do in terms of the presentation. Um, I had a writing circle group that used to meet like every day. And so one of the things we paid attention to is how different our styles were. When we would like work with each other and help each other in terms of listening and just being, some ears, just like I was hearing that Anne was going to have some ears prior to her doing her defense. Uh, make sure that you are comfortable in how you present. I'm a person who kind of works off an outline and then kind of ad libs in between, even though kind of know directionally what I want to say and what I want to accomplish. We had people in my group that were totally manuscript, like literally word for word off the piece of paper. And she felt bad because she's reading it and things like that. I said, you know, for your presentation, you want to just do whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you're most used to. They're going to ask you questions though, in which case then you're going to have to just be totally ad hoc. You're not necessarily going to have notes, whether it be outline, whether it be manuscript, and so that's where there's you got to be ready for everything. Present to a PhD classmate for feedback and questions. I've realized since graduating that we have been brainwashed in a sense to think differently. We have a different language that we speak to in terms of being PhD research folks. And even if I'm looking at a quant versus a qual presentation, if I'm looking at uh, context that topic area that I have no idea about, there's aspects of it that I get just because I've been through this PhD process. Maybe it's the research method aspect that I can definitely hone in, or just the basic concepts of the flow of what they did in their study and ask questions. If you find some PhD classmates, and probably you don't want to have somebody in the exact content area because there might be a conflict in terms of how your research and their research might play off of each other and might affect your thought process in that way. But we all think differently, and probably the farther along they are, the better. Like if they've at least been through a proposal defense, then they'll still kind of have some of that mindset already to be helpful. That will be good practice. And we used to just ask each other hard questions just to throw each other off and get used to the fact that our chair and our committee might do the same thing, might just throw us off, and we just needed to be ready and even keeled to respond the best we could. And so that practice was pretty invaluable for me and for the group that I was associated with. The end, the committee must unanimously approve the dissertation as a significant contribution to scholarly research. I mean, going in, you've kind of got your gap, your research gap that you're addressing, and now you just got to show that you've addressed it in a scholarly way. And the outcome, there's a few outcomes that are possible, but The ideal one is that one to the far left, approval as is, or with minor revisions that you just kind of check in with your chair to get completed. That is best case scenario. Next case scenario is a little more, it's more extensive revisions that the committee actually wants to make sure that they see after the fact. The third one is obviously the one you don't want, where they're concerned and they basically want some really substantial work and want you to come back for another defense. But once again, going back to those key rules I talked about of making sure that you're in line with your chair is not likely going to want you to defend unless they have a degree of confidence in the research you've done and your preparation to defend it. So they're also there to help you not fall into that third category. And like I said, it's beneficial to them too, because they ultimately they also want to look good, and they want to be able to say, hey, I signed off on face research. I was proud to be her chair or committee member. And it's kind of a feather on their cap, as well as a little bit more on their CV. At this point, as you're getting through this, there's paperwork that every school is going to have. For us at Eastern, there's an approval form in Brightspace that you just kind of virtually walk around to folks and make sure it gets signed, because you need the evidence so that you can proceed on to graduation. This work after the fact, after you've successfully defended, you're not done yet. You may want to celebrate. You may be taking a huge sigh of relief. You may just want to sleep for a while. Who knows what condition you're in at that point. But while you're excited, you're happy, you want to make sure that you do all the rest of the kind of paperwork and little activities that are required to get you to be completely done. So committee signatures, APA review at Eastern, you get 5 hours. So if you've done your due diligence on your final book, your dissertation, hopefully it won't take too much time for them to get that done. And you might have a minor tweak or here or there. One of my writing circle mates and I were kind of in a competition to see who would get the least APA adjustments. And so that's like free stuff that you want to make sure you get fixed well ahead of this point. And then you're going to finalize your dissertation that then goes to the library of your school, Warner Library at Eastern, and ProQuest. I actually just recently found out that I needed to put it as you can put it up free there, but if you put it as open, you actually have to pay. But because in my job application for the job that I recently took, there's a number of people that are like, "Hey, we want to check out your dissertation to see who you are, what you're about," kind of thing. And so I wound up having to pay here 3 years later to open it up so it could be publicly accessible. But I wish I had known that before, because that's something I wanted, was for people to be able to see my research and to be able to utilize it and reference it for other things. So that's some of the post defense work that needs to be done so that then you can finally celebrate at the finish line. And this is 5 of us from my writing circle that I always like to pull out for something like this. So you can see, yes, you can have it. You can have the poofy hat. You can have the stripes on the sleeve. 2 of us, you can see me. 2 of us had already graduated the year before, and we literally came back to support the graduation of the rest of the 3. So that's 5 of our writing circle members that graduated in 2001 and 2002. And just as an added bonus, 3 of the people received the excellent dissertation award. I got it for my work in 2021, and Lynette in the middle and Denise on the far end, who was actually Dr. Hernandez, was her chair. They shared the award the following year. So it can be done. You'll get there, and then you really get to celebrate at that point. All right, you didn't stop me. So now you definitely have to come up with some questions and discussion.
Anybody? Okay, who's got somebody has their hand up? Jake.
Yes, just a quick question. Thanks for the presentation, the kind of overview. Question I had, and I don't know if you're able to answer, it's more of a quant. Do you see that how much lit review additions and changes are more prevalent in quant versus qual dissertations after data collection?
Can answer from my perspective. I think Dr. Hernandez might be more of an expert on that. I felt like everything quant was shorter and quicker, and the quant folks, Dr. Chang, my chair, who's a qual person, would never like me to say those kind of things. But I've the people I talked to that did quant, I didn't hear doing as much follow up on the lit review as I had to do, but don't disregard it. You're still going to need to do it. Dr. Hernandez?
Yeah, good question. So from my experience, generally the lit review, generally there's usually more sometimes that I send students to do for qual than quant. Because qual tends to be emerging. You go along and you find something out in the field and you're like, hey, I didn't think of that. Quant is once you decide on your instrument and your variables and everything, that's it. You kind of locked yourself into that path. What I've seen happen more though is that students get to the data analysis and their data does it violate certain assumptions for the test that they had in mind. And so now they have to think about another test or another approach. And that might mean that they actually have to go and take a course in
Hello?
instance with correlation where you might have to transform the data or try a non-parametric test. And so sometimes some of them get stuck in that place. So people often say, well, qual, like you said, right? Qual, you have all of this work afterwards. But sometimes I have two students right now who the data isn't doing what it was supposed to do. And now they have to go back to the statistical books and think, how can I do this? And what do I have to do? So that's been my experience. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you both.
Next question. I think we're gonna see if we can. Dr. Odokara, can you stop sharing your screen?
Sure.
What other kind of questions do we have?
I just have one quick one. I'm assuming that I think I know the answer to this, but I really would love some clarification. So if you, let's say you defend your dissertation in March and you need, or April, and you need to make revisions, do you still get to walk at your graduation ceremony or the commencement ceremony? Or does all of that have to be all the ducks in a row, ready to print, ready to go to the library?
There's a couple of checkpoints along the way. At least, once again, I'll qualify this for Eastern. I had to take a step of faith in, like, let's say January, February, to actually sign up saying I think I'm going to graduate. That's the first step of faith that I had to take, and I actually defended. I think I'd have to look. It was the end of March. I want to say March 30th. So I was just before the cutoff that's
Mhm.
supposed to be out there, even though I've seen a couple of people that got special permission afterwards. Uh, I was originally told, as I was madly scrambling to get everything done, that it had to be done before walking. However, I have since seen people that have walked otherwise. And so that's something you want to negotiate with your chair. But honestly, I was killing myself because I felt like once I walked across that stage, I did not want to still be editing my dissertation. If
Mhm.
this if the changes are too substantial, that then goes back to working with your chair to work out And I don't know, Dr. Hernandez, what experience you've had with people finishing up like a few minor things maybe afterwards, certainly nothing major.
Right, yeah. So, yes, so in our department, we do have a cutoff for 1 year when you should have defended. And a lot of that has to do with working with the registrar's office because they need the title of your dissertation. They need other committee members because they're planning the program in advance. And so what the registrar's office said is that if you say you're going to graduate, because you have to fill out a graduation form and they put all of that in there and you don't walk, they're not going to put it next year. Right? So it's something where you have to think about, am I really going to make it? And do I think I'm going to finish? Because a lot of the times they'll ask you for this like in January or February there, and you have to make a decision because they will not put it in the program the following year if you don't make it. So with that said, we're invested in having students finish. So there is, but in academia, as you know, Jen, exception to policy, and your chair will advocate for you. I have done that because I know how expensive this process is, and sometimes life happens. Some of my students have had major health issues, and so even up to April, some people have defended. Once you have defended, and your committee has given you approved. Generally, nobody gets approved outright. I don't know anybody yet. Approved with revisions. Eastern University allows you to walk in the graduation. And then you have a period after to finish the revisions and so on. So that's our policy. I don't know for others. That's how it goes. Yeah. My experience, though, is that I really struggle because students get kind of lazy, to be quite honest. And I mean, I'm the only professor. And then they don't do their stuff, and you have to be behind them. Did you finish your revisions? But you will not get your diploma. You will not be officially a PhD until you have all of those things completed, because when you walk across the stage, you get an empty diploma thing. Yeah. So short answer is yes, you can walk.
Well, Dr. Hernandez, you don't know, everybody on this screen would definitely do their due diligence to get things done.
Heard that. I have somebody, I'm honestly a year out. A year out. Revisions, no. So
What other questions?
Well, let me ask a question back to the group. If is there anything that still is an unknown or is kind of daunting for you in this part of the process?
Yeah.
So mine, I've got 5 examiners, external, internal, and committee. And the internal and external have the weight in the vote. The external should be submitting a report. I think he's already submitted the report, whether or not we're going ahead with the defense, which it essentially means that I've semi-passed. I just have to not screw up the defense. The thing that daunted about is if you end up with the asshole in the room who decides it's appropriate to build their career on your back by abusing the hell out of you, what's your best tactic?
Well, I have some thoughts about that. Be careful I don't get in trouble, but I guess I've already graduated. Um, Let me give you ground perspective. So I
just a
got
minute, would
through.
you just now, Faith, I think do you think it might be okay to stop recording now, or should we go ahead?
You want me to pause it?
Yeah, maybe just so Karen feels comfortable.